You're listening to This Week in E-Commerce, the Ecom Nation podcast. Dive into the top online retail headlines with your hosts, Paul Waddy and Chia. Let's load up the cart.
This Week in E-Commerce, episode 35. I am Chia, and with me is Paul Waddy. Paul, how are you, mate?
Good, Mal. End of another week. So looking forward to the weekend, and then Retail Fest, which will be great.
Yeah.
How are you going?
I'm doing really well. I'm also very excited for Retail Fest. It is going to be a hell of a few days. I'm very excited for it. We did see that between us. We've got a couple of hundred people going to our workshops. The battle of the workshops.
And Arabella as well from Ecom Nation, who will also be there, and Kelly Partners, who we're also doing a lot of work with and hosting a dinner with, are also doing a workshop. So it's a whole bunch of friends doing workshops.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be a really fun few days. So getting a few messages from people who are looking forward to catching up. I'm excited to be hitting the gym 6 a.m. at the Dorset. If anyone wants to join me, we're going to be smashing out some early morning workouts before a big day of conferencing, or just detoxing from the night before. Whatever your poison is.
In the sauna.
Right. But I am recording for like my third or fourth location in a number of weeks. I actually think the last few weeks, I think I recorded, what was I? I was at Sydney last week at the Work It, and the week before I was in Byron.
Yeah.
And now I'm here at the co-working space in Adelaide. Whereas you are just Mr. Consistent, always in the office, or always in the den.
In the den. You were in the airport last week, which is good. But in the den as usual, ready to rock and roll.
Yep, fantastic. All right, and rock and roll we shall. We've got quite a few stories to go through, with one big one coming off with a plea to the Minister for the budget coming up in May. But before we get to that, we're going to be talking about spam and Luxottica, which famously owns Oakley, Sunglass Hut, OPSM. They have recently been fined $1.5 million for breaching the spam laws. So it's reported that they spammed more than 200,000 spam messages to customers, which did not include a valid unsubscribe link between November 2022 and May 2023. Now, I'm actually surprised that this doesn't happen more and more, because with the number of emails and SMSs being sent now, and I get heaps of them, which don't include a valid unsubscribe option. That's actually amazing. This is probably one of the first ones I've seen for quite a while. Kmart, obviously, early end of last year, they were hit with a fine, and then Luxottica, but you just don't hear many of these.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's a bit of a tricky one. And what the article that we're reading is in Inside Retail, and it obviously talks about sending emails and SMSs to people who have unsubscribed, not offering an unsubscribe option. But also, Mal, the interesting one here was that about half of the emails that they were pinged on for no unsubscribe options were actually order confirmations and password resets. And what they've decided there is that they've done the old sneaky marketing on the post-purchase emails, which a lot of brands do. And there are businesses like Navar who make an art out of how to do that the right way. But interesting, because you don't need to opt in or have an unsubscribe on order confirmations. But if you're marketing on them, then you do. And that's really interesting, because I don't know of anyone that's been pinged doing that. So probably thought they were being really clever there, and they were, until they got pinged. So that was the interesting part for me.
Yeah, but are you really being clever though? And you're 100% right. Like, it's those transactional emails versus your promotional ones, keeping them separate. But when you try to do a dodgy and sneak in the promotional messages into transactional, because it can pass the spam filters, it's so disingenuous, and it just kind of hurts you for the long run. It kind of hurts it for everyone, I feel.
Yeah, it does. It's weird. I mean, it's kind of interesting, like why they must have been. I don't know, but I guess they must have been abusing it. I don't know if they dropped people who I don't know if they repeatedly emailed people on their order confirmations over the top to the point where the order confirmations become spam, you would think a little bit of promotional marketing on an order confirmation is fine. Password reset message is a little bit cheeky, but I don't know how bold they were with this, but obviously a lot of people have complained if they've issued fines. So, and a warning out there, I guess, to brands. And I reckon real estate agents are the worst at this. Like, I don't know how I'm still on, like, every real estate agent in Sydney, and I don't ever recall opting into any of them. But there you go, just a warning that, you should only be sending to subscribed, engaged people.
So you should. Like, the one tactic someone told me to do was that as soon as someone orders from you, send them an SMS straight away thanking them, and then get them to open up the email, engage with it, so that your inbox trusts that number and that sender ID, just so that you can continue to spam them. And it just kind of goes back to, if you just do the right things, then you can build trust over time, and then you don't need to worry about any of this happening. But as soon as you start, because it is, you're giving up your contact details. I don't just walk down the street handing someone my phone number. Although the number of spam SMSs I get probably suggests otherwise. but it's such a personal medium, your phone, that when people start abusing it, it just hurts it for everyone. Like, email used to be it still is a great platform, it's still a great medium, but obviously you get so much spam there, and now SMSs are kind of going down the same. And I just wish that retailers and everyone really would just start using these channels correctly and not abusing them, because it loses trust and it hurts everyone in the long run.
Yep, and looks like similar penalties, it says here, were recently given out to Outdoor Supercentre and Kmart. So some big ones there as well. $12.7 million worth of fines in the last 18 months. So obviously there's a bit of cracking down going on. So if you're a brand that is not providing an opt-in, an opt-out rather, at the end of your SMSs and unsubscribing your emails or sending to people who haven't subscribed, you'd best be careful.
Absolutely. And speaking of being careful, that's a perfect segue to the second story, which is a study done by Adyen. Adyen's payment platform, fantastic platform, which looked at Australian retail businesses. And this number I just thought was absolutely staggering, that on average in 2023, Australian businesses lost on average $2.2 million to fraud. Now, that number just blew my mind.
Yeah, it's a big number, isn't it? An average of 2.2 million. So that's like not a total, an average per business. Really interesting to read that around the parameters of what is lost. Do they mean chargebacks, or do they mean, Adyen like to report on things like, I can't remember the name, but when it's a good customer who's blocked, they consider that lost revenue, rightly so. And they always talk at Adyen about the fact that your authorization rates should be 98, 99%, and quite often they're 95. So that's a different way of looking at lost revenue through fraud, but it's by saying that most of the fraud prevention out there is, if you've got it, some of it is so tight that it blocks 2 or 3% of your revenue in friendly fraud. Throw in a percent or two on chargebacks, and you can probably see how it's starting to add up. It'd be interesting because Adyen tend to skew towards larger retailers as well, which is probably bumping that average up. Nonetheless, it's fraud's a huge thing, and this is kind of interesting and eye-opening.
I could actually find the number from ABS in terms of just like how many retail businesses there are in Australia. It would have to be in the tens of thousands, I would have to say, without seeing it. So I tried to do a bit of the math on if each one of these on average lost $2.2 million, whether that would actually sum up to the entire Australian retail, the entire Australian retail industry. But something else which stuck out to me in the report was that the people who responded to the report felt that 63% felt more unsafe transacting online than they did 10 years ago.
Whoa.
Whereas you would think that, well, like logically, you would think that we're getting more comfortable with buying online. But again, going back to the fact that with all the bad actors around, like, we're just feeling less trusting. You know, we're more concerned about buying from dodgy actors out there. And that's something we talked about. Actually, we had a conversation about this yesterday with one of our clients about having other websites which, using a similar name, selling counterfeit products. Yeah, and the damage that does to your product, your authentic product, because of all the bad actors who are potentially doing naughty things. It looks poorly on you, so people are less trusting of you.
Yeah, that's true. I guess the bots are a real problem there, and the bots are, I guess, potentially more sophisticated, which is contributing to that higher number. But it's interesting. A part of me was sort of thinking, like, that's a lot. It's a big number. But then just reading through the article talks about Australians reporting losing $16.2 million through payment redirection scams, fake invoices. And you hear that a lot. That's like the football player, I think, who was it? Benny Elias, the property developer now, who transferred, I don't know, $1 million, $2 million to through his lawyer, and said, did you get the funds? And the lawyer was like, no. And they just jumped into the scammers, jumped into the email, issued a fake invoice, and he transferred the money. So it's pretty scary. And I guess that they're getting more and more sophisticated, and it makes people or players like Adyen, really worth their weight in gold. And they are, by the way. Like, if you pay the extra, whatever it is, 30 cents a transaction for someone like Adyen, in my experience, you can actually significantly save on fraud. That is so much that it will, and increase your authorization rate so much that it really wipes out the incremental fee that you're paying a specialist like Adyen. So fraud's got to be taken seriously for any decent sized retailer, for sure.
Now, I'm going to ask you though, like, at what size do you think at what size do you think you start needing to look at specialist fraud prevention tools, particularly if you are using a Shopify? Which I got to say, Shopify fraud prevention has improved dramatically in the last 7 years or so I've been using the platform. It's improved dramatically, but at what point do you start needing to look at another fraud prevention platform on top of that?
Yeah, I think you're right. Shopify fraud's really good. I think when 2% matters, basically. So in my experience, if you go with someone like a Riskified or a Forta or a Adyen, you should be, and Adyen have great fraud prevention, even though they're a payment gateway. You should be able to increase the amount of credit cards that you're authorizing. So that increases your revenue. And in my experience, you can lift that by a good 2 or 3%. Overseas, with the right fraud setup and the right white labeled, local banking setup, you can increase from 95 to 96, 97. So you're talking about an actual revenue increase of 3% through the authorizations, which a lot of people don't talk about. They just talk about the chargebacks. And then a lot of these guys will actually guarantee you 0 chargebacks as well. They're so confident in that they're blocking fraud and letting through the right orders that they'll actually guarantee they'll wear the chargebacks as part of it. So I think when you're a bigger business and 1 or 2% in authorizations matters, then you should start looking. So, I mean, I think 20 million, 30 million and above, because when you're smaller than that, it's not to say it won't work for you, but it's very unlikely to be your lowest hanging fruit. Is it going to be worth the slightly extra fees, the onboarding, the upheaval? I always think you just kind of work on the next important thing. But, if you're at the point where you're pretty lean on your P&L and everything's flying and you're trying to find a % here and there, then I would probably look at, an Adyen, a Riskified, a Forta kind of thing.
So in terms of like your top list of like optimizations, that's probably like towards the bottom of it after you get to that certain point.
We did that at Showpo when we were about 50 or 60 million, because we were kind of like, all right, now we're at that stage where we can take those meetings with people like Adyen and Forta and like, all right, let's hear what you're really about, because everything else is running pretty well and we're highly profitable, but let's see if we can pull another $500,000 a year through authorizations in the US, which we did, by the way. We were on track to do. So it definitely does work. But yeah, Shopify is inbuilt fraud is awesome, and sometimes it's easier just to focus on other things and keep it simple while you're relatively small.
Yeah. Good advice. All right, and moving on to the last story we're going to cover today is the NRA have said that we are in a cost of trading crisis with a plea for retailers for federal budget relief. So Rob Godwin, our good friend, has come out and said that that while there is a focus on the high cost of living, high interest rates, and low consumer confidence, this has had the effect of pushing retailers into a cost of trading crisis, and looking for the federal government in the May budget to address this, particularly around the higher cost of trading. So this is looking at things like all the input costs which go into running a business, driving up the prices while there's lower demand. And some of the statistics which is called out in this are quite alarming, in the fact that 44% of retailers expect things to get worse, 55% expect a decline in year-on-year profits, and 77% expected their overheads to get worse. It's like a trio of just horrible news there. I don't even know where to start with this one.
Thanks, Rob. Firstly, like, really good article and well said by Rob. Where do you start with it? I don't know. It's a good time for your mustard analogy, perhaps.
Yes. I think I said that the other week, but I was talking about mustard.
Did you?
Well, no one's heard this yet. It's like the 3 bottles of mustard. Like I mistakenly bought 3 bottles of the same mustard in a 12-month period, and looking down at the prices, the price went from $5.95 to $7.95 to $9.95 for the same jar of Dijon mustard. I just there looking at this guy like, this is inflation. This is just how wild things are. And it didn't even occur to me how much things had gone up. But it is just the way things are, that prices are going up.
I won't presume to know where you bought it from, Mal, but that could be, price gouging. And I think what Rob's concerned about here is particularly makes a good point, I think, on rural and regional ecom businesses who have a 5% adoption rate versus 18% for metro, which is a shame, because we know that consistently rural areas are in the top 5 or 10 consumers, Wagga and Dubbo and so on, Toowoomba. But it's a good point, if you're sending a parcel to a regional area, it's going to cost more. It's also going to get a worse service. It usually has to get sort of hub and spoke through different carriers. And at the same time, if you think about that, if you're a regional-based e-com business selling, I don't know, whatever, clothes or something, and your competitors are offering free shipping because a metro parcel costs them $6, and they don't have a metro, they're just sending everything, a large distance for $13 or $15, then that's, if your AOV's $100, that's 10% extra logistics costs straight off the bat by way of where you are. And that's a really good point. Businesses in the bush and so on are struggling, and typically do, and supply chain in such a big country really could be, I'm sure, subsidized, or there could be some form of support, as Rob asks for in this article. It's a serious barrier. Like it's a why would anyone open an online business in rural and regional Australia when the logistics costs are three times that of being in the city? So I think Rob makes a good point. I don't think it's anything new. I think we're seeing that, Mal. Like, it's a report found that 29% of retailers have cut advertising costs and reduced spending on customer acquisition and retention. I think it's all those things that we've been talking about for nearly 2 years, which is like, what did we say last year? Consolidation. It's a period of consolidation. We've identified that Origin have done that well, Kogan have done that well. There's been heaps of brands do it really well and actually significantly improve profitability. So it's an opportunity for us all to look at our business, and it does show you can actually do better than ever if you just buckle down and focus. But at the same time, we've also reported on, good businesses having to unfortunately go into liquidation. I think TDE went into administration again.
Yeah, I talked about that last week. So Marquee Retail Group, or Marquee Retail Brands, went into administration with TDE and Colette, and this is this is the second time in administration. So we are looking at quite a number of businesses which this is happening to. Obviously, we had Tiger Lily not too long ago either. And in this case, we're predicting, Rob's predicting anyway, that it is going to get worse. I just wonder whether government subsidies or government cost controls are necessarily the answer. Because also, where do you start? If you do this for retail, do you do it for hospitality as well? And hospitality is also suffering too. It is going to be incredibly challenging, as we all know. But it's how do you adjust for this? Like, because I don't think there are always winners and losers, in any downturn. And like you said before, there are some businesses, like potentially the regional and rural businesses, who may suffer more than others because of their costs are going to go up even more. So they are going to be losers, but they are potentially going to be winners as well. And it's the what's the old saying? What did Winston Churchill say? Never let a good crisis go to waste. And if there's so many businesses who are pulling back, maybe this is your time, if your unit economics stack up and your product market fit is on point, that you could potentially actually grow through this crisis.
Yeah. And, 15% of people are expecting profits to grow. 55% are expecting a decline in year-on-year profits. So people are worried out there. And I see, Rob is warned the federal government or advocacy for a higher than normal increase in the minimum wage. That's a really hard spot to be in, because the wages need to go up to counter this $10 mustard that you're buying. And to counter that, we know we're employers as well. People need more money. Their rents are going up. Totally get what Rob's saying as well. It's like, well, hang on, just think about the business owners, because e-commerce and retailers, I think he says, the second biggest employer in the country. Like, these guys can't necessarily afford the minimum wage to go up too much. So it's not a good position to be in at all. And then I guess Rob's sort of saying, well, you want wages to go up. We're expecting to go backwards, and our insurance premiums are also going up as well. Start lasering in on some of these people who do appear to be taking advantage of the situation. And, he cites insurance, which is a great example, because you need insurance to trade. And we know insurance is a funny one, because it goes up almost every year, and especially if you allow it to auto renew, the escalation is out of control. And that's a different topic. They approve you so easily, but they will kick up such a stink when it comes to paying out insurance. Still haven't paid out many people in northern New South Wales, Northern Rivers, who got houses damaged, and they had insurance. But anyway, I get Rob's point. It's a hard one to say increase the minimum wage while these businesses are expecting to go backwards. Something kind of doesn't work there. So it's a really tough one.
Look, you also look at it, the unemployment rate is also remarkably low. Like, despite all these economic headwinds, we still have a 3.8% unemployment rate, which is not bad.
Yeah, I think it's good. Like, businesses what we see a lot is businesses are surviving, and it's often the founder that's not getting paid. That's the last one getting paid. And so they're kind of just a vessel for money. Sales are coming in and sales are going out. So a lot of them are getting by, but just not profiting. And it's really interesting. Like, it's a hard one. I think the onus is on the government to, like, where do Aussies spend their most money? I'm assuming it's groceries and petrol and things like that, and mortgages, obviously. It's incredibly difficult to keep raising interest rates, which I know is designed to curb inflation. Keep raising interest rates, asking businesses to come along for the journey and fund those while inflation goes up. But then at the same time, that retailers are going to go backwards. Like, it's just all kind of waiting to implode. And it kind of is. Like, retailers are closing down left, right, and center. So what Rob's saying is 100% already happening.
Absolutely. I think, I've always thought anyway that interest rates are a very blunt instrument to address. It's what's the saying? It's a hammer when you need a scalpel. For it, because if you want to address the right, like, what is actually causing the rise in interest rates, it's housing costs, it's petrol, it's those things. But whereas a blanket overall increase in interest rates affects everything. It affects your discretionary spending, which affects retail, which affects hospitality. It affects, and again, there's so many businesses. Like a mate of mine who owns a bar was saying that, they're probably going to close if things don't improve the next 6 months, because all their regulars, rather than coming in every week, they come in every 2 weeks. They get fewer new people who are coming in, and it affects them. And it's all because, people just have less money to spend, whereas that's happening across the board, rather than just focusing on how do we actually reduce the price of the things which are getting out of control. Like I said, housing and fuel costs.
Housing and fuel costs and mustard.
Yeah.
I think
and mustard.
That's a good point. And think back to what caused inflation. Really, it was the government spending that drove inflation up. Government dishing out money to fuel spending. So they got it wrong. Right. I'm not saying it was easy, but they got it wrong in that time. And, wise man once said government has no business being in business. They were doing all the spending that drove inflation. And then they just like, whoops, everybody, we spent a lot of money. Everyone put their prices up, and now not giving you that money. We know you all can't afford it. Slow down your spending. Let's raise your interest rates. It's terrible. So, I don't know, something doesn't feel right. I'm not smart enough to understand it, but good on Rob for having a crack there on behalf of retailers and e-commerce businesses for sure.
Yeah, we just pretend to be economists on podcasts.
Yeah, we just read like people like Rob's comments and then just, agree with him.
Well, I'm looking forward to catching up with Rob in a few days' time over in the Gold Coast. However, Rob, I will not be running 6Ks with you on Wednesday morning. Paul might, but I will not.
Rob inspired me Rob owes me $100. I haven't reminded Rob, but Rob predicted that Australia would lose the Ashes to England 5-0, and I have very gentlemanly way have not reminded Rob until this public podcast. So I'll be gently tapping Rob on the shoulder and reminding him of that. But he inspired me to go for a run at last year's Retail Fest when I saw him jogging along the beach. So he's leading by example in many ways, Rob.
Fantastic. Actually, one last thing which I will point out, if you go on Domain right now, you can find a very, very special house on top of a hill at the end of a cul-de-sac in Queensland, which is just on sale. After our favourite collaboration of the year comes probably my second favourite. Bluey's house is listed for sale on Domain.
Really?
Yeah, so we'll have to link to that. My sister-in-law sent me that the other day. I didn't see a price. I think it's opening for inspection, I believe, in August, which I think ties in with when they're opening Bluey World. So it's all very, very smart marketing. And your kids watch Bluey, my kids watch Bluey. Yeah. They've also put the house, they've alluded to putting the house on sale on Bluey as well. So, and I believe it's all tied in to open up Bluey's house for inspection when Bluey World opens. That's my prediction anyway.
Yeah, very good. Very good.
All right, Paul, that's all we have time for this week. I am looking forward to catching up with you and the rest of the crew in the Gold Coast next week.
When does this one come out, Mal?
Well, it's going to come out while we're at the Gold Coast.
Okay, so Ecom Nation's got a booth there. Don't know the number. You'll work it out. Come and find us and grab something, some merch from us and say hello. We're going to give away some strategy packs. So come and see if you're applicable for one of those. But we'd love to chat to people, always do. So come and say good day.
Fantastic. All right. Have a great weekend, Paul. I'll see you in the GC.
Okay. See you, Mal.